John Caudwell is with me, business leader, philanthropist, founder of Phones for You, and also Caudwell Children, which is a brilliant charity which helps disabled children reach their potential, and it's wonderful. Hello, John.
Good morning.
Very good morning to you. We're on to talk about these Brexit talks, but I wonder, should we do COVID first and the Tier 2 restrictions in London and elsewhere, Tier 3 in one or two areas? How do you run a business at this point?
Well, I mean, it is now impossible for some businesses to survive through this COVID. It's why for 6 months now I've been campaigning with the government to give businesses full support as and when necessary, and not to think about the budgetary situation. Now, we can afford that because the simple fact is that we've got zero interest rates and we can actually borrow within reason as much as we want to, and don't need to worry about financing that debt, because for the many, many, many years to come, there's going to be zero or even negative interest rates. So eventually one day we may have to pay that money back, but we've got time to, under Caudwell pandemic recovery, to build this country back up again and make it prosperous and be able to afford to pay debts back should we need to.
In terms of trading, when there is so much uncertainty around the Brexit talks, this is just sort of swamped by COVID news, John Caudwell. But, talks between the UK and the EU certainly haven't gone brilliantly so far. But whilst everybody was running around in the media yesterday saying it's over, they're not invited to London anymore, the EU, it's now finished, I don't believe that for a moment. I think this is a negotiating stance, pure and simple. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. It is a negotiating stance. Brussels have played it very, very tough for 4 years. Unfortunately, we under Theresa May were really lily-livered and soft, and that gave Brussels a feeling of power and feeling that they could manipulate us into a corner. But the simple fact is that without any restrictions on Britain whatsoever, a trade deal with Britain is amazing for Europe. It's an £80 billion surplus for them. They cannot afford not to do it other than out of political spite and political manoeuvrings and political motivations. So under all commercial reasons, this deal will be done by Europe, but I do worry about the political motives in this, because, of course, part of the reason that they're playing hardball so much is that they realise that Britain can be very prosperous without them, providing that we don't have our wings clipped. And they don't want other countries to see that, because they realise that it's just the beginning of the end for Europe. And so they're really trying to do the best that they can to give us a hugely tough time to put anybody else off thinking of following suit.
But at the moment, there are no tariffs between the EU and the UK. Standards, regulations, sanitary checks on food. I mean, all of these things tough to agree on without a deal. I mean, services, 80% of our economy would be so heavily affected by this. We are now 6 weeks away from when this has to be in place. And as somebody was saying yesterday from the EU, I think Philippe Lambert, the Belgian MEP, if this was going to be a Canada deal, which Boris Johnson has been talking about, and those in high-level government also, that took so many years to negotiate and has to be done line by line. Give me a way forward then.
Well, I'm not an expert on all those issues, but I don't actually believe it has to be done line by line. Actually, we've been complying all with European regulations now for many, many years, and we also have our own set of standards that we comply with. It's not as if we're a third world country being forced to comply with some very heinous regulations. So I don't think there's that much difference in the way that Britain would be complying with regulations anyway to the European ones. So I think that's a bit of a non-issue, really, unless the Europeans make it an issue.
John, just away from Brexit and a last line on COVID-19, the new tier restrictions that we saw this week already. Which city are you from in the north, John?
I'm Stoke-on-Trent, which at the moment is in the low-risk area.
Right. OK. So you haven't suffered tier 2 or tier 3.
No.
I think you're medium, because for some reason it didn't start at low. It started at medium. and then went up from there, which was kind of weird.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, that's what I was calling low.
Yeah, I mean,
because medium is the new low.
Have you? I mean, do you think the government have had clear messaging on this? Somebody.
Well, I could be very critical of the government, but also, I have to say they have inherited the most difficult challenge that any government has ever had since wartime. I think it was extremely difficult to make the right decisions, and nobody knows what the right decisions are. I think overall they've done a moderately okay job. I think the communication could have definitely been better. One of the things that does really concern me is the lack of really looking at the alternatives of no lockdown and protecting the older and vulnerable. Now, of course, we have done that to some extent, but there does seem to be a very, very steep paranoia still towards making sure infection rates are low. And I don't think we can do that. I do think that we have to build herd immunity, because if we keep doing these lockdowns and these mini lockdowns and these circuit breakers, or whatever Keir Starmer was talking about the other day, which I thought was a nonsense, a 2-week circuit breaker, all it's going to do is just slow the spread of the virus temporarily. Immediately we all get back to normal. It'll all just spread again. And I just don't see any solution other than the herd immunity argument.
Yeah.
And protecting the aged and the vulnerable. And of course, there will be deaths, and that's tragic, but there's going to be deaths no matter what. No matter which way we do this, there's going to be deaths. And at the moment, we're crippling people with other illnesses and crippling the economy, and there's going to be so many more deaths from that. So my belief is that if you take the COVID deaths that we've got in the way we're handling it now, the deaths as a result of the economic fiasco that are going to occur through suicides and depressions, and the deaths because that we not ignored exactly, but we were not able to treat cancer patients, strokes and heart attack patients and victims during the worst of the lockdown 4 months ago.
Yes.
If we take all of that, my belief is that the damage that we're doing to the British race is much, much greater than the damage that would be done by just trying to control, trying to look after people, trying to protect the aged and vulnerable, and letting the virus.
Well, we've certainly kicked around that the very difficult equation that you've just outlined, John, and we're going to continue to do it here.
That's a huge difficult equation, and I wouldn't like the responsibility of making that decision.
John Caudwell, pleasure. Thank you. Business leader, philanthropist. Pleasure. He's a founder of Phones for You and Caudwell Children. Really quite a character. Well, that's interesting that he would say that, isn't he? Isn't it? That, somehow you have to live with it. Because you're delaying the inevitable and just doing vast damage, which is damaging and killing other people if you continue to lock down. Do you see the logic of that? Do you understand that? Do you agree with it? 0345 6060 973. Tej, you'll be next after the news from Bill Over.